Joining us now to discuss that sweet spot of crypto regulation and the U.S. political landscape is former White House Chief of Staff during Donald Trump's presidency and Astra Protocol strategic advisor, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, it's great to have you on CoinDesk.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. All right. First question. Your role as a strategic advisor with Astra Protocol, you joined this firm last April. Could you just tell us more about what you guys are doing there and how you fit into just helping them with figuring out compliance and the current regulatory schemes?
Sure. And thanks for asking. I have been looking for ways to get involved, not necessarily in crypto. And I'm a crypto fan, don't get me wrong, but I'm more interested in the underlying sort of infrastructure, the blockchain infrastructure I found in the blockchain caucus in Congress, I think back in 2013 or something like that. Been following that industry ever since. Then did a little bit of oversight into it when I ran the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for a year in Washington, D.C. And I was looking for an opportunity to get involved in businesses that were going to change the fund infrastructure of blockchain. And Astra is one of those companies that I found. What they will do is allow sort of crypto and blockchain to go mainstream. They're going to allow banks, financial institutions, anybody who wants to handle crypto or any blockchain-based transaction to satisfy the AML and the KYC requirements, anti-money laundering and know your customer. This is a big part of sort of bringing Web3 into the mainstream. And I thought it was a tremendous piece of technology. In fact, it is fabulous technology. I think they just started trading on the exchanges on Monday. So it's clearly one of several companies that has a lot of momentum. And I think we're all looking for ways to sort of direct blockchain in the future. And Astra is one of the folks that are driving that conversation.
All right, you've obviously worn a lot of hats. We all know that. And the Great Point suggests that you've reportedly put your hat in the ring, keeping in mind that hypothetical future where Ron DeSantis becomes the president and you, his chief of staff, if obviously things go that way. What insight do you have regarding his crypto vision for the nation and globally? Yeah. We already know that he's kind of a crypto advocate for Florida, but for the nation, what would it be in your eyes?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm on the short list for Ron's chief of staff. That's sort of a job I don't think anybody really sort of welcomes the opportunity to do that job twice. I think one person did it. But anyway, yeah, Ron's very forward thinking about this. There's no question. I think he understands. Listen, I saw the earlier session that you had with Commissioner Pierce, and what she was saying was extraordinarily reasonable. I'm not sure it's sort of the pervasive attitude within the SEC right now, or certainly across the broader government, but that attitude is the right attitude to have, which is the government is not an avenue of first resort. It should be last resort. People should be allowed to make mistakes. I know that Ron agrees with that. I know that he's been very open-minded about how to deal with crypto and blockchain in Florida, and I'd imagine he would bring that to Washington. It's probably not surprising when you get this next generation. Keep in mind, I mean, Trump is 78 and Biden is 80, and when you get to the next generation of leaders in both parties, I think they're a little bit more open to new technologies. Jared Polis, for example, governor of Colorado, who I fully expect to run for president if Joe Biden does not, also very tech savvy. So it shouldn't surprise us that this next generation of leaders is more interested in a fulsome debate about the topic, and I think that's encouraging.
You know, you mentioned Hester Peirce's views on crypto regulation, but nonetheless, there seems to be a lot of confusion as to whether or not the SEC should regulate the spot markets, if at all. What's your take on that? Do you think that it should be the CFTC or the SEC? Or, I mean, it seems like you'd rather have nobody at all, but should Congress therefore act and actually write that piece of legislation?
Yeah, no, I'm not one of the nobody at all. In fact, one of the reasons I was so fascinated by this technology is back in, I think, 2011, which was my very first interaction with blockchain. They were asking for regulations. They were asking for a light touch. But at that point, keep in mind, crypto, we didn't know what crypto was. And how did you treat a sale? Was it a taxable transaction? They were looking for guidance as far back as 10 years. And I think that's the right sort of Goldilocks moment. It's not the wild, wild west of no regulation, but it's not overly regulated to the point where it crushes innovation. We're looking for something down the middle. And I think that's what people continue to try and look for and work for in Washington, D.C. is between the CFTC and the SEC. I come down to the CFTC side, have for a long time. I've worked with the former director of the CFTC. Really what I'm interested in, though, is a fair shake. one of the reasons I think right now the SEC would be the worst decision, the worst place to go, is that Gensler has a bias against it. And I don't want my government regulators to have a bias for or against. I want a government regulator to be an umpire, not a coach or a fan. So when Gensler's there at the SEC and I'm sitting here and I'm pro-crypto and pro-blockchain, do I really want to go that way when I know I'm sort of picking a fight with the other side? I'd rather have somebody who's looking for to call balls and strikes down the middle, and I hate to use so many sports analogies, I apologize, but someone who is neutral when it comes to the policy and just interested in that proper level of regulation. I think you get that more in the near future out of the CFTC.
Just to make this a little bit more tangible for people, you're actually advising a protocol, and I assume you guys are here in the United States. Are there any regulatory obstacles that you've run into in that capacity? I mean, you hear this a lot, like it's so hard to be in the United States and everyone's leaving, blah, blah. I mean, have you actually encountered that in the work that you've been doing as an advisor?
Yeah, just because there's no rules yet. We're very active in Europe. We're very active in Asia. We're active in Australia. But there's just no rules here. And the money, listen, most of the money that we get that are interested in this comes from overseas because they're unwilling. They're little unwilling is not the right word. They're more cautious about investing in the U.S. because they don't know where things are going to land. My dad used to tell me sometimes when I was a kid and learning to drive, sometimes it's better to make a quick decision even if it's wrong. That's sort of what we're waiting for the federal government, is give us something we can work with. It's been 10 years now since we, and we still don't have any real guidance as to what even crypto is. The Germans had a definition of this asset class over a decade ago. We still don't. So I think it does discourage investment, and certainly because it discourages investment, discourages innovation, and certainly we're seeing a bit of that along with the rest of the industry.
So where will crypto land according to you? Nobody knows. Well, few people know what Congress does. But you know that. What's going to be realistically? Realistically, do you really see even one major milestone coming in the next 6 months when it comes to the regulation roadmap from Congress?
Yeah, I do. And in fact, I dabble in sort of a lot of different areas, from the debt ceiling to crypto to, foreign policy and Brexit. And on most circumstances, I have to tell people, look, not much is going to happen in the next 6 months to 18 months. It's different with crypto. Patrick Henry, who is the congressman from North Carolina, who's the new chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, is very committed to this. He's actually created a subcommittee on digital assets, which captures crypto, blockchain, and a bunch of other things. And he's made French Hill one of the most capable members of the House Financial Services Committee with a financial services background as the subcommittee chairman for that group. In addition to that, in addition to giving it the attention that it deserves, there's still a lot of bipartisan support for this sort of light touch regulation. Both parties are interested in seeing crypto and blockchain flourish. There's not very many things in Washington, D.C. right now that are still bipartisan. Maybe antipathy towards China, maybe sort of distrust of big tech, and interest in seeing proper regulation done in digital assets. That's a rare field right now. So when I talked to McHenry and he says that he's cautiously optimistic that Democrats want to work on this together, they're going to have a series of hearings. They're going to have probably several hearings and maybe even several pieces of legislation. I think there's a better than average chance that you do see meaningful bipartisan regulatory legislation coming out of the House and passed into law in the next 6 to 18 months. It certainly won't happen inside of 6 months. But in this Congress, I think there's a real chance of seeing that.
So speaking of hearings, I have to ask you this because you were chief of staff under President Trump, but here we have now two presidents who seem to have secret documents or confidential documents inside their possessions. Is it a product of the fact that these are two guys you would expect to have VHS players flashing 12 o'clock all day long, or is there something else going on here with how their house documents are stored? What do you think is going on here, and how serious do you think this is for both presidents?
Yeah, I think it's a serious sort of PR issue. I'm not worried about it being a serious national security issue. I recognize, and I know probably more than I wanted ever to know about the classification process and what gets classified as a classified document. Keep in mind, when we would travel overseas with the president, we got the little booklet, the tick-tock of the day by day, where we were going to be when the meetings were, and that was classified at a certain level. So when people say classified information, the public automatically assumes it's the nuclear codes. I have no worries about this being that kind of stuff. So mostly it's a PR difficulty. Mostly it's a reflection on the fact that you overclassify. My guess is that both George Bush and Barack Obama have been running around their libraries in the last 2 weeks looking for stuff. So I'm not too concerned about it in that sense. We got bigger things to worry about than whether or not there's 6 documents next to a Corvette in Delaware.